Hi, this is Dr. Baker from the Limerick Chiropractic Center, and I want to welcome you tonight for our conversation on healthy habits to live by. Now, I'm going to start out by just simply telling you, when you listen to this tonight, I want you to recognize there is way too much to unpack in 30 minutes. We could spend the next couple of hours talking about some of these topics, and we still wouldn't have exhausted the information. So one of the things I'm going to ask you to do is make sure that you leave yourself notes, the reminders of things that you took away from this conversation tonight. So as always, you're always going to like this video. You're going to make sure that in the comment section, you leave some of those really big takeaways that you want to remember. And then finally, I want you to share this video with others, because there's going to be nuggets in here that you recognize other people need to hear about. And it's always one of those things that it's always easier for them to hear from a third party than maybe from you yourself, from a spouse, from a loved one, from a neighbor. You know what? This is a simple and easy way to share this beneficial information. Now, one of the things I want you to recognize is when we start talking about problems with healthy living, one of the huge problems that's out there is this thing called the standard American diet. The standard American diet, well, there's history on it. This is not the time to talk about the history. But the outcome is exactly what we get to see every single day. We get to see it in statistics. We get to see it out when we're walking about in the neighborhood. We see the greater level of disease and breakdown, the sickness, the illness, the increased level of suffering. See, the problem is that we as Americans, we are one of those really great outcome studies. The standard American diet has been taught to us since we've been in elementary school, and we get continually taught and marketed to this information. And because we hear it so often, it's exactly what we believe. We buy into it. We continue to actually just follow those recommendations, even though they're flawed, they're broken, they're lies, and in the end, produce absolutely horrible outcomes for each and every one of us. In fact, one of the really big outcomes is the fact that, you know what? We're normally not suffering from just one chronic disease process. In fact, 60% of Americans carry around and suffer with one chronic disease process. Now, before we get on with this, I want you to recognize when we talk about chronic disease processes, that means that you have to take a medication, you have to have a constant procedure in order to deal with that particular diagnosis. And it's not like that you do it for a week or a month. When you're labeled with that chronic disease process, you take that medication for the rest of your life. Now, the gripping reality is even though 60% of Americans have at least one chronic disease process, 40% of Americans have at least two or more. And we wonder, how in the world could we be spending so much money on healthcare? Well, the problem is that, as we know, well, listen, when we're not taking care of ourselves or we're relying on an outside source, those type of things cost money. And the reality is that, you know, when we look at the cost of what does chronic disease processes cost, according to the CDC, it costs over $4 trillion every single year. Listen, you're out there, you're shaking your head back and forth like that. $4 trillion. Now, I want you to recognize chronic disease processes happen to be something that are within our control. And in turn, being in our control, that means that we can affect that number. That's not a number that we have to live with. That's a number that we're choosing to live with, but definitely can be improved upon. In fact, one of the really big things that has come about, and with the episodes as of late, we recognize how obesity complicates things, and this happens to be one of those chronic disease processes. There's an increased prevalence rate. We don't need to, you don't even need to see the numbers, but the numbers are absolutely striking because this defines other choices that people are making that lead them to having those chronic disease processes. The rate of obesity has increased in this 3-year span of time from 30.5% of Americans to over 40% of Americans being obese. See, and here's the sad, gripping reality is that, listen, our children are the best of us. They're also the worst of us. They learn more by what they see us doing than by the words that come out of our mouth. And hence the reason why we're seeing 1 in 5 children are obese. There's no wonder why there's a skyrocketing rate of, high blood pressure and diabetes in children. Yes, I said children. Because they're not waiting until their 40s and 50s to get to the point where they're obese. No, they're adolescents, they're in their teens, and they're clinically obese already. Now, here's the thing. We could talk about and focus on the problem. But more importantly, we really need to be more focused on what are the choices? What are those things that help us solve these problems? Now, I'm just going to tell you, you probably want to get your sneakers out. You're going to need running shoes, okay? So let's not kid ourselves. If you haven't done your stretches yet today, you might want to take a second or two to get going. Because let me tell you, when we talk about the list of things that you're capable of choosing as healthy habits, it's not like there's 1 or 2 things out there. There are dozens of different things. We're going to cover a bunch of them. And I can tell you now, I'm not going to cover them in great detail because, hey, listen, there's so many of these things. I want you to at least have those headliners, those highlights, in order to dig into them more at home. In fact, that might be one of those things that you choose. Because as we take possession of the problem, as we meet it head on, guess what? As we make better choices, we get better outcomes. I know it was Keeney. He had done a research study on the leading causes of death in the United States. It wasn't heart disease, it wasn't cancer, it wasn't tumors. It was poor decision making. Poor decision making led to chronic disease processes, which led to demise much sooner. So we know if we're making those better choices, we get better outcomes. And like anything, you know what? I recognize, we're not 100%. We're going to have good days and bad days. But it's recognizing and giving yourself grace when you have one of those bad days that it's today. We're going to get back on the horse. We're going to step back into the ring. We're going to start going back in that right direction again. And just because we failed one day doesn't mean that it's all a waste of time. Absolutely not. Nobody's perfect. So like anything, we want to make sure that we're making the better choices most of the time, that we're choosing fresh fruits and fresh vegetables most of the time. Hey, listen, if you want, you can actually plan for a splurge day. There are diet programs out there that actually teach exactly that. I know Body for Life was one of those programs that's exactly what they taught. You did things really, really well during the course of the week. And then guess what? On the weekend, you splurged. You had all those things, but then you got back on track. Now, doesn't that sound like a plan that you could follow? Most likely, yes. This is not an all or one process, all or none process. We need to allow ourselves those opportunities of enjoying the things that we do enjoy. So let's think about something. We need to be drinking water. I could go through and talk about, and I know we've done whole classes, and if you need more information on why water is so important, listen, we can start from the top and work our way down. Everything from brain function to every tissue in your body requires it. It lubricates the joints. It gets rid of toxins. The list just goes on and on. 75% of our body is water. 80+% of our brain is fat and water. We need it. Get over it. And it's H2O. H2O. If you can't take a shower in it, it's not water. And it's such a simple formula to figure out what you need. Take your body weight, divide it in half. Put that number as an ounce, and that's what you want to start consuming. That puts you in the ballpark. And yes, I know everybody's going to complain. Oh, yeah, by the way, doc, if I do that, I'm going to run to the bathroom all the time. It's like, guess what? The answer is yes. What goes in has got to come out. Now, I want you to remember that. And we're starting with water because we are what we consume. Not just eat, what we consume, what we put into and onto our body. So as we start looking at this, we need to cut down on fats and oils. Now, many of us don't even realize how many calories we get from fats and oils. Well, let me tell you, if you do a diet diary for even just a week, just write everything down. Look at the highlight version. Look at what it is that you're consuming on a regular basis. Most of these foods, we consume a huge number of calories just from fat. And yes, there's good fats, there's bad fats. And you know what? Like anything, we want to make sure that we're reducing those bad fats. And one of the really simple ways of telling a bad fat is, well, hey, listen, if it's a solid at room temperature, definitely a bad fat. All right? I know some of you out there, you live by your Crisco. Now, there's a time and a place for Crisco. Let's not get crazy. But here's the thing. Crisco, that white stuff that sits on the counter, you could leave it out pretty much forever. Guess what? Bad fat. All right. When we start looking at those good fats, we start looking at things like the lower saturated fats, the monounsaturated fats. Listen, we want to choose those really, really great fats. In fact, those better fats, those essential fatty acids, those things we want to consume. We want to incorporate them into our diet, and they're not that hard. We can cook with them. You're capable of also putting them as salad dressings. You need to be creative. Now, I'm simply going to tell you, listen, I love to cook. I love the fact that we're going to be doing workshops with cooking here in the office. And in turn, you know what? If you need suggestions, I want you to leave those in the comment section so that I can personally respond to those. Now, one of the things we talk about fats, well, meats too are one of those things where we want to reduce them down. Yes, I know that we need it. I don't live by an all or none rule. But let me just tell you, meats have fats in them. And on top of it, any way you cut it, whether it's beef or chicken or pork, guess what? Your liver only knows one thing. You put that product into your body and your liver is going to form cholesterol. We've done workshops on cholesterol. If you want, go back a week or two, look at the last two workshops that we talked about those topics in order to get more information. All right. So in turn, if we reduce it down, guess what? We're making better, healthier choices for ourselves. If nothing else, we want to make sure that we're cutting back. Now, there are so many research studies out there that talk about what does high meat consumption bring to us, high protein consumption, things like cancer, osteoporosis, kidney failure. This is not a chiropractic thing. You go research it if you desire. The information is already out there. We don't have to argue about it. The last time I checked, listen, all the information still remains the same. Strychnine, arsenic, hormones, antibiotics do not get cooked out of your meat products. Therefore, what get pumped into your meat products, you get to consume. And your body will absorb those things. So yes, we are what we eat, and we are what we consume, whether it's those good things or those not so good things. In fact, if you haven't gotten the memo, dairy is not one of those really good things for you. And when I say dairy, anything made with cow's milk. Last time I checked, we don't look like cows. We're not supposed to be consuming the product because we're not a calf. We don't have the same body size. We do not have the same needs. So let's get over this conversation. In fact, the research has demonstrated that protein in cow's milk, the casein, is carcinogenic. It's cancer causing. So whether we're talking about butter, ice cream, sour cream, yogurt, you name it, it's bringing that along with it. Creates inflammation, creates phlegm. It's going to eventually cause cancer. We've done whole workshops on Dump the Dairy. There is a really great book out there, Whitewashed. If you want to read it, read it. Okay? We could talk about how all of the different parts of that process do not benefit your body. Fruits and vegetables are absolutely one of those really great choices. This is something that most people shy away from. In fact, one of the workshops that we'll be doing in the future is how to eat on a budget. And this is one of those things which most people think, well, eating healthy costs more money. Shake your head, no, it doesn't. Better choices do not always mean more money. But you know what? In the end, we have to live in the world of reality, which is, I don't care how much it costs. When we look at a banana, the last time I checked, reading the label of that thing is really simple. You peel back that yellow skin and there's going to be a banana in it. You're not going to find a French fry. Okay? That's not what's going to be in there. You buy an apple, you see that skin, guess what? There is going to be an apple pulp inside of that. We don't have to worry about reading through a laundry list of all types of ingredients, all types of different chemicals in order to understand what we're consuming. Fruits and vegetables, many of us don't consume enough of them, therefore we're mineral deficient. We don't give ourselves what our body needs. In fact, you know what? Although there's this craze that's out there that, hey, listen, we have to limit, we have to remove certain things like carbs from our diet. No, there's bad carbs and there's good carbs. Yeah, a donut's not necessarily on the good carb side. But you know what? Grains, legumes, these are things that have positive influences on our body. And when we talk about filling, long-lasting energy, these are some of those things that we might want to consider. For some of you, this might be one of those things where, listen, you might have to just simply work on the balance of making sure that your plate has the proper amount of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins on it. Many of us, it's the balance that we have a problem with. So in turn, one of those things where we just simply have to recognize, sometimes we have to do our homework. We have to pre-plan. In fact, a lot of times doing our homework comes in need when we start looking at sugars, particularly if in fact you're going to be buying things that are in a can or in a jar. Because let me tell you, Sugar's been used as a preservative forever, both sugar and salt. And the problem is that sugar is one of those addictive chemicals, those addictive things that go once they go into our body, the hunger centers of our mind have a tendency of wiring and firing to want to consume, not just go back to it, but consume more and more of it. So in turn, we want to make sure that we take note of how much sugar is in the products that we're consuming. And let's realize that sugar has a lot of calories. It takes an awful lot to burn this stuff off, which is oftentimes why, you know what, things like tooth decay, diabetes, obesity are on the top of the hit list of some of the problems that it brings to the table for us. It's not the only ones, but they're high on the list of things that it will cause you if, in fact, you're consuming too much of this. Just like salt. Salt is in all types of foods. Processed foods are going to have salt in it. Uses as a stabilizer, uses as a preservative, guess what? There are so many hidden forms. Now, here's the thing. If you have never taken a class on reading labels, I would strongly encourage you to actually do exactly that. Because buyer beware. You need to make sure that you know what you're consuming, which means with your body weight, with your size, with the amount of energy that you expend during the course of the day, how many calories you're burning off in a day's period of time, you should know how many calories you should be taking in and what are those best forms for you to be consuming. Salt, we need to cut back. Food's supposed to taste like food, not like salt. And most of us have forgotten what food is supposed to taste like. Now, caffeine, this is something that's been a craze over the last 5, 10 years with our kids. The monster drinks, the energy drinks, those type of things. Destroying the adrenal system in our body. See, and the sad thing is that, once you've damaged it, yes, you can withdraw, you can rebuild it, but it takes so much time. And let me just encourage you, if you want to do just a simple experiment at home, I want you to not drink coffee for 2 days. I'm not asking for a whole week, do 2 days. And record how you feel. If you're irritable, if you're tired, if you're, just a little bit on edge, maybe you can't focus, or maybe you have that brain splitting headache. Your body's telling you. You've overdone it, you have too much. Test the system. Test the system so that you know how addicted you are to it. And certainly one of the healthier habits that I would certainly recommend, and this is something that I walked away from a really long time ago, are sodas. Sodas have absolutely no beneficial ingredients in them whatsoever. There's no positive that we can talk about. The high levels of sugars. If the sugars aren't there, then you're substituting with a chemical sweetener, which when you dump it into the body does some really, really horrible things. Research is out there. It's already been documented on how it affects your system. Oh yeah, by the way, that carbonation, those fun little bubbles that you see, every one of those bubbles, what they do is they just simply reach into your system and they're grabbing a hold of a piece of calcium that's supposed to be in your bone and they're sucking it away. I've had bodybuilders, power lifters who drank soda their entire lives. These are big, strong, physically active guys with significant levels of osteoporosis because what they were consuming was robbing their body of what it needed to keep the bone healthy and vibrant the way it's supposed to be. Maybe some of you out there need to take a look at how many sodas am I consuming? How many carbonated beverages do I take in on a regular basis? And just like alcohol, listen, again, I'm not saying that you have to stop. But you know what? I also want you to recognize, buyer beware. Unfortunately, beer is not gluten free. Unfortunately, beer causes inflammation. Many of the alcohols that we consume also lead to other issues and other metabolic problems. And, this is not the time for that, that lengthy discussion. But let's recognize the fact that it's a choice. And for some of us, we're making it that choice on a daily basis, 3, 4 times a week. Making it that healthier choice may be either walking away or not consuming nearly as much. Now, there's nothing I can say nice about this topic. Yeah. If you haven't gotten the picture, it should only be this: quit smoking. Okay? And the reason why it's so important for me is because we're working with many of you on recovery from different damages and different problems within your musculoskeletal system. Unfortunately, when you smoke, that little cup that you call red blood cell that's supposed to be carrying energy to every single tissue of your body, well, when you smoke, instead of that little cup getting filled with that energy, it gets filled with a toxin, with a poison. That chemical blocks your body from being able to transport stuff to different places, which means you can't heal as quickly or at all. If you talk to an orthopedic surgeon, this is going to be one of the very first things that they say. You want a better outcome? Stop smoking. You want to recover more quickly? Stop smoking. It is going to slow everything down. And for some of you, maybe we need to sit and talk about, well, how is it that I help myself walk away from this? Everybody is different. There's not any judgment. We just recognize it's not a good choice. I don't care what it does to your heart, your lungs, your liver. I don't care what it does to your breast, your pancreas, and anything else. The one thing I recognize is that the health of our body is diminished if, in fact, we're consuming these products. We want to make sure that we're exercising them. We should be doing this regularly. Everybody should be getting out on a regular basis, walking, engaging, stretching that body of yours. Moving is absolutely the key. And we should be doing that on a daily basis. Finally, get out in the sun. That vitamin D, it is a free vitamin. If we do this one little thing, get out in the sun. For some of us, yes, we can use a happy light in order to simulate it. Okay? But there is nothing better than to be out in the sun, grounding ourselves while we're out there. In the end, not only physically does it help our body, does it help with our sleep, mentally, it helps on many, many different levels. And this is free. We can all do this. You want to make sure that you detox and cleanse. Sometimes just got to sweep out the corners. Got to get rid of the debris, take the trash out. Yes, it's time, it's effort that we put into it, but we get that opportunity of helping ourselves function better and easier. Any one of those suggestions could have been an hour-long conversation easy. I want to hear from you. I want to hear what's that next thing for you. What is it that you should be doing in order to help yourself live a healthier lifestyle? What's the next thing that you desire to improve upon for yourself? See, in this conversation, it's got nothing to do with me. In this conversation, the first person and the most important that benefits is you. Each and every one of you out there. These were healthy habits to live by. They're not absolutes. You're going to pick and choose those one or two that are at the top of your list. In fact, I'm going to encourage you, make sure you come back and rewatch this to figure out what the next one or two healthy habits are going to be for you. I'm Dr. Joseph Baker from the Limerick Chiropractic Center.